Hi, I'm Mark. Welcome back to Foothill Paint Fabrication. Well, we're not working on a truck or a car, painting or anything today. We got a little project to kind of improve my shop around here. So I picked up this Win 5-inch metal cutting bandsaw about 3 weeks ago. I got it from Home Depot. And you guys may know or may not know that I don't have a lot of room. This is a pretty small shop. And so everything's on wheels. And the last thing I want to do is every time I use this thing, just like my chop saw, you got to drag it off the shelf and either set it on the ground or something, and then you're crawling around the ground cutting steel. It's just a pain. So what I would like to do is to actually get this bandsaw stored underneath my welding table and then have it slide out or flip up or something when I need to use it. And then when I'm not using it, it just folds back down and it's on wheels because the table's on wheels. And then, you know, it's ready to go again. I don't have to drag it off a shelf, find a place to set it, and cut the steel. So that's what we're going to do today. Try to figure this out, and hopefully it works out. So let's jump in here close. I'll give you guys a quick tour of this bandsaw, and then I'll show you some features I want to change on it. Okay, here's the saw itself, and the reason I got this is because frankly I'm sick of using the carborundum chop saw. It doesn't cut all that great. I mean, it cuts, but it doesn't cut straight. They're not very precision cuts, and I'm tired of eating the dust and everything else, and the thing's half burned up. So I needed something else to make cuts with cuts on steel that were pretty clean and really nice. So I picked this up. I think I got it for $425, $429 or something like that, 400 bucks from Home Depot. Amazon sells it for the exact same price, but if anything went wrong, I just want to be able to drive over to my local Home Depot and say, hey, it broke, so it's under warranty. So that's why I got it there. So it's a standard saw, you know, just your typical, it's got a lock right here. Let me unlock it so it flips up. And that's about as far as it goes when you get it. Now, I'd seen a lot of guys on other saws actually turn them into a vertical saw, and so there was a little screw around on the back side here that stopped it right about here. And all I did was take the screw out, and now this thing goes vertical. So now what I want to do is put a plate on here so I have a nice flat vertical saw as well to cut, you know, small pieces of sheet metal or whatever I'm doing. And we're going to get to that in a little bit too. So I think that's going to work out well for that. And it's a small one, but it's plenty big for what I do. You know, I'm always cutting. I don't cut more than really 2-inch, 2.5-inch tubing, you know, other stuff. So I think this is going to do a great job. I've already made a bunch of cuts with it. It seems to work pretty well. I got to adjust it so it's cutting straight, right on the money. So right there, it's worth it. Okay, so my first plan was to have it kind of just swing and hinge right here. Now I made this template out of cardboard. It's a lot easier to handle this cardboard than that thing. So I just kind of wanted it to swing right here and lock up. But as you can see, it's just going to stick way out on the end, and I want to keep everything as compact as possible. So I messed around with all kinds of levers, and I even had my son's old director set out, and I made some linkages and everything so it would kind of store down here, then swing up, and then pivot at the last second and lock into place. But it was getting very complicated, and there was a lot of engineering going on, and I thought, well, it's just way too much just to hang a saw underneath the table. So kind of changed my game plan. So now I've got it where my idea is to have it slide underneath the table, so it'll sit like store like this, I hope, then slide out, and then pivot up, and then slide forward and lock into place. So that's really what I'm going for, and that's hopefully what'll work. So let me bring you in close, and I'll show you what my idea is for that. All right, so this is going to be the rail that the saw slides on to store. And obviously there's plates down here, and we have to clear the frame and everything. So I made these little standoffs right here, and they're going to be you know, spaced about like that. And I'm going to weld these on and then weld them to the underside of the table, so this shaft actually sits, you know, something like that, but up underneath. And then after that's done, what I want to do is, this is going to be the part that slides and it's going to be able to slide all the way up underneath there, and the saw will be hanging directly below it. Now, to get all this to work, the saw has to be hanging on something. So this is the piece it will be hanging on, and what I want to do is take this hinge right here, and I'm going to weld it on here, and I'll weld it on there, and so what will happen is we'll slide it under the store. There'll be 2 of these, and then the saw will be hanging off of this. Then when you're ready to use it, you slide it out, then you pivot this one up, then you slide it back in, and it locks in. So, and that's the idea. So this hinge, I picked it up at Home Depot, I think. It's a fairly tight hinge. It's got some sort of washers or something in there, and it's really stiff. It's not like a little cheapo gate one that's you know, all floppy. So, and it's rated for a fair amount of pounds, so I think it's going to be able to do the job. So let me go ahead and get this tacked up together, make 2 of these, and then we'll get them tacked underneath the table, and then we'll see, you know, we'll go to the next step and figure out how to mount the saw. Ultimately, when the saw flips up like this and locks in like that, it's going to be facing the wrong way. So then I picked up a Lazy Susan to mount it on there, and a little locking pin. So once it swings up, it'll be facing this way, and then we can rotate it like that, and then you know, we can lay the material out across the table, or it's at least out of the way. So that's the game plan anyway. So let me get this all tacked together real quick, and we'll get it kind of figured out underneath, and maybe just tacked up a little bit, and then we'll kind of do a quick test on it, see how it looks like it may work or not, and then we'll move on to getting the saw mounted to the actual arms, and then, you know, see if it's going to work. Okay, I got everything tacked together. Got the hinges on here, so it's looking pretty good. I've got these pieces made up. Now I'm just figuring out the spacing. The base on that saw is about 12 inches wide. So when I weld these underneath, I want to make sure that we land in between the holes for the, you know, fixture clamps. So we don't want, you know, to cover up a hole or get too close to a hole. So if I do it 12 inches on center, they're going to land right in the middle of the holes, so we don't have to worry about that at all. So really all I need to do now is flip this table over and kind of clamp these in place and figure out the distance forward and back, and then make sure they're nice and parallel, and then we can tack them into place. So let me flip this thing over. It's not light, but I'll flip it over on some blocks of wood, and then we'll get all this laid out and tack it in place and take a look at it. All right, well, we got the setup, we got the table flipped over, and I got it set up. These are my little homemade fixture clamps. These are Harbor Freight jobs. I welded a 5/8 rod on the end, or basically a bolt. And so I've got it clamped in, and I've got the other one just temporarily clamped there. I'm going to do one at a time, and I want to put a little bit of a pitch on this. I want it to tip down, which would actually, when the table's upright, it will actually be pointing up a little bit. So when the saw is hanging out there, I'm going to try to account for sag in the metal. So it's going to be total guesswork. So I'm going to actually get this tacked in, and I'm probably have to shim the one back here to get that to tip up on this side, which is actually down right now with the table upside down. And that way we can kind of counteract some of the slop in the slider, and then a little bit of the flex in the tubing here. And like I said, it's just going to be guesswork. So I want to make sure this is running perfectly parallel with the table. I want to get my distance this way, and then I'm going to go ahead and get that pitch in there and get this all tacked down, and then I'll move over and get the other one to match, make sure it's running perfectly parallel and everything else, and then we'll flip the table over and we'll do some testing. So let me get this tacked up real quick, and we'll get the table flipped over, and we'll see how it's going to work. All right, I got it mocked up. I just got a piece of 3/16 clamp between here to simulate the top here. So it seems to slide pretty good. It'll come out for storage. It'll hinge down like that. Now the saw will be sticking out, you know, right here, and then we're going to have to push it in, and it'll store just like that. So, and then when we want it, we're going to have to grab it. I don't know how that's going to work, and slide it out so we can get it out to here, and then we'll just flip it up, and we'll slide it in a little bit just like that, and then the saw will be right here. So you know, I'm probably gonna have to slide it out, you know, far out here, rotate it, and then slide it back in a little bit till it's closer to the table. I may put some sort of ear on here because I've only got it tacked, and I can flex that down a little bit. So it's not going to be a precision thing, but if I have some sort of ear on here and the plate that the saw sits on, when I slide it forward, if it can push on that and lock, and that maybe 2 little clips or a bar across here, so when it slides on, then that'll be supported on this end as well, because we've got a pretty good run right there, which is just kind of hanging out in midair, and we're going to have some pretty good leverage on here. But I think this is going to work. I think this is probably the easiest part of the whole thing right here. Once I figured it out, it's just now we have a plate, we have a Lazy Susan, and a locking pin to figure out, but I think this is going to work out good, so I'm going to go ahead and flip this back over and permanently weld those the mounts there on the standoffs. I've got probably 5/16 of an inch difference, so this end of those tubes are higher by 5/16 of an inch, so hopefully once the weight goes on it, that'll equal out, and the thing will sit pretty flat. Total guesswork, but I took a shot. So I'm going to weld this up, and then we're going to start designing the Lazy Susan and the rotating and all that stuff. Okay, I got a piece of, I don't know what that is, 14 gauge tacked onto the rails underneath. I've got the saw clamped up to it. I'm just trying to figure out how this is going to work, how it's going to fit, how it's going to go. I still haven't permanently welded that, so that's just tacks holding this whole weight of this thing. So let's see if it'll lower down. What'll happen, I gotta be very careful. I don't want to break a tack and have this thing hit the ground. So that worked all right. Let's see if it'll slide in. Slides into the stop. I'll let go of it. Well, it fits. It's what I wanted. It's swinging way farther back than I imagined it would, but that's not that bad because it keeps the motor out of the way. I'll probably make some sort of lock so it's a little bit farther up out of the way and lock it in place, but that looks like it's going to work. So the next step is figuring out the Lazy Susan, so when it comes up here that it spins around so you're cutting this way and your material's across the table here. So let me flip that up and we'll move in close and figure out this Lazy Susan situation. Okay, so we got this 16 by 16 piece of 14 gauge, I think what it is, on here. And here's the Lazy Susan I got. It's rated for like 100 pounds, so it should be plenty heavy duty enough. And it's kind of tapered, so the bearings are kind of exposed if I mount it this way. So I want to mount it like this, hopefully to protect it a little bit more for metal shavings, grinding, and all the other crap before that thing gets so chunky and clunky it won't turn. So that's the plan on that. But now mounting it to this plate, pretty simple. Just drill a hole, put a screw through that. But how am I going to mount it to the saw and then mount this to this plate? So that's going to get a little tricky, right? So I'm going to have to figure out some sort of studs or something to make this work so I can slide it through and just put some nuts on the underside. So mounting this Lazy Susan over here on the saw, this is right at the width of this saw. That's why I bought it, because it was the biggest one that'll fit. And I just don't want to put a plate on here. I've got this some more steel. I could just put a plate on here and attach this, but I'd rather attach it, to the base, not just to the lip here. So what I'm going to do is just build a little frame out of tubing, some square tubing scrap I've got, so it bolts there, and then it was supposed to bolt here originally, but I'd like to, bolt it there and then somewhere over here to make it a little bit stronger. And then all I have to do is make it in such a way so I can actually attach this to it, like that. And then we just have to worry about getting the Lazy Susan attached to that other plate, and it'll be pretty much ready to go. I do have a locking pin, so when this thing rotates, it'll lock. So we're going to have to figure out some ears for that and some sort of setup. So I'm going to get to work on this little frame right now. Should be fairly simple. And then I'll bring you back when I've got something to show you. Okay, I got it all kind of figured out here. I found this piece of, I don't know what it is, 14 gauge, I think. It was kind of rusty sitting over there, so I'm going to cut that up, and I kind of made it work. for what was available. So I welded some 1-inch tube on here, and on the top of those I welded some 1/4-inch thick steel, and I drilled and tapped that for 5/16. And so what I can do now is I can bolt this onto here through the top here, the mounting holes. But before I do that, what I can do is I can attach the Lazy Susan to this plate with these mounting holes right here. And then I can mount the Lazy Susan to this plate here. You see that hole right where they've cut it out there, right there. There's a big hole to put a screw through that one. I'm just going to cut a hole in this plate right here to match. And then I can actually take this after the Lazy Susan's attached here, and then lay it on here, and then attach it to here, and then put the saw on top of it and bolt it down, and that should be it. So let me pop this off here real quick, and I'll show you. It's going to fall. So that's all it is right there. I had some 1-inch by 1/4-inch thick, and I just cut it and welded it on the top here, drilled and tapped it. So those sit right where the mounting holes were. So I've already had it bolted up. That's when I welded it. So all I have to do is finish welding these all the way around, and this plate's ready to go. Then mount the Lazy Susan to it and drill that access hole, and then we can test fit it, and then we have to move on to working out the locking pins, figure that out. So let me get this welded up and get the Lazy Susan on, and we'll test this thing out. Okay, I've got it all mounted up. I've got a couple of C-clamps holding it so it doesn't try to spin because we haven't put the lock on it yet. So let's just test it out, see it slides and stores up underneath there. So far so good. Just like that. So that part is working. It's out of the way. It's a pretty big saw actually to hang underneath here, but it looks like it's all going to work. So let's get this locking pin figured out, and we're going to be just about done with this one. Okay, here's the saw as it rotates. So that'll be for storage, and then that'll be for use. So you can just have the material go out across the table. I plan on making a little block for the other end to hold the material at the same height as the clamp here, and that'll be about it. So we do need to lock this in place so it doesn't rotate. It moves pretty easily. So I want this to lock easily without much fuss. So I picked up this kind of a spring-loaded T-handle, kind of a lock. It's weldable. So I've already drilled a pilot hole through the base of the saw, through the plate that bolts the saw to the Lazy Susan, and through the base plate here that slides in and out. So I drilled a hole here, so it's in this position, and then I drilled a hole over here, so that would be for storage. So what we need to do now is this comes apart, so I can weld this barrel to that mounting plate underneath and have it so it just, when you put the saw back down, that the hole will be right there. This threads right into it just like that. And then all you have to do is pull up on this handle, this T-handle, and rotate it over and drop it back down in the hole. There is a slight problem. This barrel right here isn't long enough, so I'm going to have to add a little material to it, and this pin is not long enough. Now, I could have bought a longer pin, but when I was figuring all this out in my head, I didn't think I was going to need a longer pin. So I could order a longer one, but I've got this. I might as well just use it. All I have to do is weld a little extension on here, weld a little extension on here, and then get this all welded up and it's good to go. So I drilled all these holes at the same time. I clamped it and drilled all the way through to make sure everything would line up properly on both locations. So all that's left to do is take the saw back off, figure out how much length I need to add to this barrel right here and to the pin, and then basically put it together. So let's find some pipe that'll match this, and some rod that'll match that, and all I have to do is weld it together. Okay, so I got that tube extended just the right length, so it'll be the same height as this one, so when the saw sits down, it'll be sitting on there flush. I got that tacked on in place. I drilled a couple of 1/2-inch holes. So that part's pretty much ready to go. I'll weld it more once I'm done, and I'm sure it's all working. Then I extended this rod right here, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 5/8 of an inch, welded that up, and then kind of ground it down, and it was looking kind of janky. So I took it over to Dave's, and he put it in the lathe, cleaned that up, and it's not quite 7/16, it's a little bit bigger than 7/16, so it'll fit inside this 1/2-inch hole real nice. It's not, doesn't have to be precision fit. So when this is done, the saw will sit on here, and this will go right through the top of the saw and thread in, just like this. And this will be the stored position. And then when you pull it out and you are ready to use it, then you just pull up, slide that out a little bit, and just lock it like that. And then you can use the saw when you're done. We'll just go like that, and we'll slide the saw back inside. So this is all starting to work out just like I had hoped it would. Now this thing flexes quite a bit, and that's the tubing flexes. It's still just tacked, but my tacks haven't broken, so they're holding. So what I want to do is right here, there's a plate part of the table. So what I want to do is I want to put a couple of round rods right here, drill a hole here and here. And so when you pull this out, you rotate it, and then you slide it back in, those rods will actually slide into that plate and help hold the weight. I think that's going to be a lot, very advantageous instead of bending those rods if I'm really bearing down on something, or if I pull it up and push down too hard on it or something. So I think that's going to work out good. And that'll be the next step, is getting those made up, and then making a little angle bracket for them to weld on there, and then finding the spot and drilling the 2 holes. And that's going to pretty much finish up what we need to do. I need to add more screws to this plate where the Lazy Susan bolts down. It's only screwed down with 4. I want to use 8 on each one. Really, this Lazy Susan's designed for being pushed down and rotated. I'm kind of actually hanging. The saw will be hanging almost upside down on it. So that's not really what it was designed for. It's just sheet metal. So I'm going to put some extra screws in there just to make sure it doesn't flex and, kind of get out of kilter. So other than that, we're getting really close. So I'm going to work on getting these little mounts ready for those rods, and then figure out where to put them, and then drill the holes. And hopefully that'll help stiffen this up quite a bit when you're using it. You can kind of bear down while you're cutting. Okay, I got them all welded in, got the holes drilled, and it is working really well. I can push down really hard on here, and it'll actually lift the table up on the other end if I push down hard enough and it's not flexing. So this is really working out. So basically, all it is just a round rod, 1/2-inch rod. There's a 1/2-inch. Actually, I opened the hole up bigger than 1/2 inch, so it slides in easy. So this is the deal right here. When you lift up the saw, you just slide it in like that, and it's solid. It's nice and solid, so I'm pretty happy about that. It's going to work out well. I still haven't welded the rails underneath. They're still tacked, so this little gadget right here made it a lot stiffer. And it doesn't interfere with anything, and I'm pretty happy that stiffened it up like I had hoped it did, because it was pretty floppy over here. So let's go ahead and get this whole thing put together. I finished in some welding up underneath while I was welding that up, and so that's pretty much done. So let's put it together and see how it works all in one piece. Okay, let's test it out. I got it all bolted down, so I got it shoved in so it's locked nice and sturdy. So we have to pull that back just a little bit so this will rotate, otherwise it hits the table. We lock it like that, pins in, and we just pull it back a little bit. Grab the handle and slide it on in. So that works pretty good. These rails are going to get dingleberries and slag and stuff on them from welding and grinding and everything, and it's not going to be easy to slide. So I'm going to come up with a really thin piece of sheet metal and something so I can just slide it in to protect those. It'll also protect the motor, and then I can slide it out and clean it off or whatever. So let's go ahead and slide this out like we're going to use it. Bring it up, just slide it in just a little bit so it stays. Turn it till it locks, and then jam it in so it's on those pins. we're ready to go. So really happy to get this done. I've actually been taking this on and off, I don't know how many times, my back's starting to get sore, but it'll be nice to finally get this permanently mounted, and all I have to do is flip it up. And then when I'm not using this or the table, I can just roll it outside when I'm doing body work or whatever else, and it's not in the way. But it's really convenient if I need to make a quick cut. I don't have to drag it down off the shelf or the chop saw or anything else. I can just flip it up and make a cut. And if I'm doing other projects, I can leave it like this until I'm done, and then just stow it away. So I'm really happy this is working out. Okay guys, this project kind of snowballed on me. As you can tell, there's a lot more added to it, and it looks a lot different. I did quite a bit of work off camera. You know, once I got the saw on here, this Wen saw, and that was working really good, I was thinking, well, you know, I've got that Harbor Freight belt sander, and I always use them together, so I want to figure out a way to store that on here as well, store it underneath. So I went down that rabbit hole, and then I'm like, well, I seen other guys hang grinders off of theirs. That's a great idea. And then I need, of course, somewhere to hang all my clamps. So I'm done, at least for now. But it's working out really well. The saw is working great on here. The clamp storage, that's just a square tubing across there, and the grinder storage, not rocket science by any means. But so let's just go around here, and I'll show you how each part works, and maybe you guys can get some ideas for some of your storage needs as well. Okay, let's take a look at this thing. So I just welded a piece of 1/2 by 1/2 square tubing across there just to hold the clamps. That's working out pretty good. I didn't realize how many clamps I had until I started cleaning the drawer out. So the saw is in the lock position. It's ready to use. You just pull the handle right here. You slide it out a little bit, pull the handle up, rotate it around, lock it back down, pull it out, fold it. You saw me do that. So I think that's going to work out really well. Where the material clamps or rests while it's being cut is not the same height as the table, so I plan on making a block with a couple of 5/8 dowels rods on it, and I can just set it anywhere along here, and then the material will rest on there if it's long, and that should work out good too. I still haven't made that up, but I need to pick up some 5/8 rod. And then I added a power strip to it, because I don't know how many times I plug and unplug the grinder, this, that. It's just very irritating, time consuming. So I found a power strip laying around in the garage, screwed that on there, so that's going to be nice. And the grinder storage, I just got one hanging on here right now. That's just some flat bar, and just welded on there like an L. And then this took me a little bit, not near as long as the saw, but it's just the Harbor Freight belt sander, and I do use it quite a bit. And so I wanted to place a way to store it. So let me put the camera back in the tripod, and I'll show you how this works. Okay, before I show you what it looks like getting stowed, let's go ahead and take a look up underneath. You can see right here, all I did was, this is just 1x1 square tubing, and I put a couple of hinge points right here, welded those onto the bottom of the table, and then it just goes out. You can see right here, the other leg on it, I actually had to do a little whoop-de-doo around the guide for the saw, and then it just goes out here, and then the saw bolts down to it, and I put a spring-loaded latch right there. There's a rod right there, and that goes into the latch right here, and that's what holds it up in the locked up position for use. So let me stick this in the tripod, and we'll take a look at it being stowed. Okay, to go ahead and store it, all you do is just fold down the belt sander portion, and then just lower down for the disc here, the table. And I just kind of been throwing this around here, get it out of my way. And then here's the knob right here, spring-loaded latch, and then just lower it down. And now when the saw comes down, let me show you that. When the saw comes down, now it kind of rests up against the belt sander. So it all works out pretty good. I think this is going to make it a lot more productive for me, and a lot less hunting around in the drawer and looking for clamps and everything else. So I'm really liking the way it turned out. Okay guys, that pretty much wraps up this video on getting the Wen saw mounted so it could be stored on my welding table. Now, I obviously did a lot more work than I had planned on, but once I got started, I really got the juices flowing, and really wanted to get all this done. It's stuff I had been thinking about doing, and really, you know, you guys seen how small this shop is. I need to roll, everything I have is on wheels, and I just wanted to be able to roll this in and out. I wanted to be able to do something really quick and not have it be a big deal like it usually is. And a lot of you guys are working out of your garages, you know, it's no bigger or bigger than this shop. And it's nice just to roll stuff in and out and just get back to work. And really that's what we want to be doing, not cleaning, taking stuff off shelves and, you know, looking for a clamp or whatever. So I think this is going to work out great for me. I'm not building frames. I just need a small table, but I need a good workspace that's portable. And I think this is going to work out great for that. Thanks for joining me here at Foothill Paint and Fabrication. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already, and mash that bell icon so you get notifications every time I release a new video. We'll see you on the next one.